whether
Okay.
the ability to delegate or trust or like outsource a certain decision is it person's inherent nature or it's a side effect of organizational growth. If you're on rocket ship, a lot of projects will be delegated to you and you will be king. But the moment you hit a choppy weather, everything will be folded back.
Yeah.
So you have to like tactically find out whether this person is like trust his team by default or he trusts his team because he is too busy to.
Welcome to My Best Hire. I'm your host, Rajeev Soni. On this show, we decode how great leaders identify exceptional talent and how outstanding professionals become invaluable to their organizations. Through in-depth conversations with executives and business leaders, we uncover both sides of the success equation, helping leaders build stronger teams while showing professionals how to stand out and make a lasting difference. So whether you are building teams or looking to advance your own career, join us as we explore the stories of remarkable talent and the leaders who recognize their potential. Today on the show, I'm thrilled to welcome Prashant Singh, a veteran product leader, startup founder, and one of the most quietly influential voices in India's consumer internet scene. Prashant is currently the head of product at Jar, where he's building one of the fastest growing fintech apps in the country. Before that, he was the VP of product at Paytm, where he played a key role in shaping the mobile payments revolution that we have seen. And long before it was fashionable, he co-founded Shifu, a predictive personal assistant app that blended context, AI, and mobile usability in a way that few had attempted. The company was acquired by Paytm back in 2015 for $8 million. Prashant brings over 15 years of product experience, and his apps have crossed 50 million downloads. And that's not counting the ones that he quietly launched at Spice Labs or Apple in the early days of Indian mobile boom. And folks, today's episode flips the script literally. Prashant isn't here to talk about someone he hired. He's here to talk about how he hired his boss. Yes, you heard it right. So instead of scouting talent for his team, he went looking for the right leader and the right mission to bet his next chapter of his career on. It's a bold and refreshing take on what it means to make your best hire. And trust me, you're going to want to hear this episode to the end. Prashant, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Rajesh.
Perfect. Prashant, so you want to give us a little bit of synopsis of your career and tell us about a bit about Jar?
Sure. I'm a computer science engineer by education. Never really, to be frank, never really finished my degree. Was too eager to start my first company straight out of college. Started something, shut it down in 3 months. Worked in sales for a while. Then when the mobile thing, iPhone and mobile thing started taking up, I joined a bunch of mobile startups. So I worked in a company called Monsoon Multimedia. It was a Silicon Valley based company and they had the tech backend in Noida. So I joined them as a QA person first, then set up their entire QA process, product process and all. And because I was too keen to kind of play around with like application, they asked me to kind of start designing and all. That's how I kind of had a segue into the world of product management. Back then it was not called product management, it was program management, delivery, you name it, like UX person. Pretty much everything anyone else was not willing to do, whatever falls through the crack of the functional boundaries, used to come into my plate. So yeah, worked there for 4 years, then joined a series of assignments where we were building consumer app for Indian market. So I joined a company called Spice Lab where we were building mobile apps in like games and kids games category. I was also the product manager for world's first standalone Symbian Twitter app called Trill back in the day. And then we collectively made around 27 apps when I left, and we had around 50 million download, 500,000 unique page views every day on an aggregate, roughly 750,000 or 1 million, depending on which day you count. We used to have roughly $2,000 to $8,000 a day of revenue. Apps were primarily, we were number one publisher on BlackBerry and among top 10 in Asia Pac for Google, Android. And Android was in its infancy, sub 5,000 category was still not Android. So yeah, I'm an old person. Like, it goes like long back. After that, I started my own company, which was like you mentioned in the intro. It was an AI company. We tried to build a personal assistant app which can recommend what you gonna do next on your phone. Turns out we are way ahead of our time. Now maybe the right time to build that product. Small company, we ran it for 3 years, sold it to Paytm. I joined Paytm as a VP product for their consumer app division. Worked there for 4 years, took a little bit of break, and then joined JAR, my current assignment. JAR, as you mentioned, we are a fintech firm. We are essentially providing micro saving solution for NBU, next billion user, tier 2, tier 3 India, where you can basically buy digital gold for like 10 rupees, 15 rupees. On a very micro payment basis, you can buy digital gold. And you can also set like SIP kind of an arrangement where essentially every day 10 rupees is then you connect your UPI account and every day 10 rupees is taken from your bank account and we buy digital gold worth of 10 rupees. This essentially cultivates the habit of savings and financial discipline into our user, and this kind of becomes the gateway drug for other financial services. So the idea is that we acquire customers for gold, and then we try to cross-sell and upsell other financial services or other commerce services to them. One of those services we recently launched is the jewelry. So you essentially accumulate digital gold, and then you can encash that gold for either jewelry, our own brand neck, or you can encash it back into the liquid cash. That's mostly it. We have seems like we are doing well, like around 20 million plus download last public numbers, and like we have like funded by the likes of Tiger Global and Arkham Venture and all.
Nice. So, who are we talking about today as your best hire?
I must say before I give you my best hire, I must say this is really interesting premise to start a conversation or a podcast, your best hire, because hiring is kind of sort of converted into a voodoo art, like, or say pure networking or pure gut call. I don't agree with both, like extreme. Yeah. So interesting topic you have chosen today. My best hire, like we went, I was my own boss. So back in the day when I was looking for a job change, and mobile technology was on the boom, I had multiple offers at one point of time without taking names. So basically, I was at one point of time I was evaluating 4 offers, and it was all 4 of them were really in decent company, well funded, and actually all 4 of them were something at the intersection of what I wanted to do. One was in enterprise mobility, other was in location-based services, one was in pure games, and other was in social media. And so game one was basically games and platform play. There was one platform play also. That was with Spice Labs. So, and it was a very difficult call for me. So I did what everyone with an engineering background do. I basically made a pro and con list where was essentially, do I need to relocate? Do I really like the domain? Where do I see? Is there enough room in the company to grow? What can be my possible career trajectory? And I realized pretty much all those calculations were either speculative or biased.
Okay. Yes.
And you can pretty much, and that was a futile exercise, a fool's errand. I did a stack ranking of all the options and sometimes company A comes on top when you basically give more weightage to compensation. And when you look at the growth avenue, you give this thing, other company kind of pops up on the top. But none of them were inspiring confidence. So I realized that my whole lens of looking at the situation was wrong. Because pretty much there was not a whole world of difference between the compensation. So I said, might as well look for any other factor as a principal variable. And I realized I'm young back then. So I might as well optimize for learning. And who are these people I interviewed where I had maximum learning? And so basically it all boil down to the question of I will be spending most of the time with my boss, given my role. So I basically looked at who was my boss in all 4 assignment and did I really enjoy it? Turns out it was a very good filter.
Okay.
Because 2 of those people had an instinctive feeling that if I join those companies, I will be by and large be tolerating those people. So those are instantly out, because yeah, much as I like the team, I didn't really like the boss. And
Understood.
as the common maxim goes that people join companies and leave managers.
Yes.
So the probability of that happening was slightly high in those. So those companies, in spite of the nature of product and some good team member, I decided to like kind of cross them out from the list.
Okay. I think it would be very useful to actually get the context. When was this?
So it was like post iPhone and before Facebook. Well, I post iPhone and Facebook before
Okay.
Facebook IPO, and
Okay.
so yeah, you can say around.
2011, 12.
Yeah. So then the remaining two companies, I try to I have a habit of making extensive notes. So I went through my notes. Even as we are talking, I have a notebook open here and I scribble down everything we discussed. So I can actually go back to those notes and like how I was feeling. And like funny thing, so I used to record those conversations, some of the telephone calls. So I actually replayed those conversations on my telephone to kind of again have a more objective and more thorough look at the kind of conversation and the exchange of ideas I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still more or less tied in
Okay.
those two companies. So I asked for, and they both were like following up, the HR was following up, and I said, I want to have another discussion with the CEO. And I threw a curveball. Okay, I want to have a discussion on a neutral turf. So I really, for one CEO, I asked him for breakfast, and other CEO, I asked him for a morning walk.
Okay.
They were like, okay, interesting. Nobody really does that. So the breakfast person said, okay, look, I'm not a morning person. So can we do it a coffee or something?
Mm.
So that was okay. We went there, and the morning walk person who eventually became my boss and morning walk, but in the last moment he kind of cancelled.
Okay.
And he said, look, I have something. I have to go pick up somebody from the airport in the late hour of the evening. So I will not be able to make up to the morning walk. But can we do it post dinner?
Hmm.
So yeah, so my final interview with that person happened at around started at around 9:30. I had bunch
Okay.
of 9:30 night, and then we went for a walk in Noida along the metro line and had a cup of tea, thela wala, and we discussed everything from the relative merit of Android and iOS and like what is the next big category out after gaming and advertisement coming out of this thing. What do I want to build and why I'm not starting up and how long I see myself.
Hmm.
He had a bunch of questions ready and he has definitely done his homework. It was not cut and dry cookie cutter questions he was asking. He was asking, he
Okay.
has gone through my CV and because it was a walking discussion, so he was not carrying a paper. So it was pretty impressive that he had actually done his homework. I had done my share of homework also, so I also had questions and which he kind of liked. And then yeah, you can get
Understood.
into those questions if you want,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah.
we would love to. That's what actually I was. But before we get into the specific questions, I want to understand at the larger level, what were you evaluating when you were speaking with the CEO?
So the thing is, one is essentially I wanted to evaluate that how much of this person is open to new ideas. Because see the thing is, product management back then and to a certain extent today also suffer from this whole syndrome where everyone thinks that they are good at product management. And this becomes an also run thing. So somebody is doing engineering. See, somebody is CTO and he's also managing product. Somebody is sales,
Yeah.
he's also doing product management.
Yep.
Somebody is doing design and yeah, additional responsibility of product. What happens is at some point the company grows and then they
Yes.
go to market for hiring a VP product or a senior product manager. The question which I usually ask, and usually at that point, I come into the picture.
Hmm.
Either they have raised Series A or they are expanding, so on and so, or they're replacing their first product hire. So I ask a couple of questions. First is it a replacement hire or is it a new hire? If it is a new role, it's not a replacement hire. the level of uncertainty is very high because they don't know what to expect. It's the first time for them, first rodeo. And if it is a replacement hire, then the question is what didn't work with the previous guy and what you have done in this selection criteria, which is essentially different from what you've done in the previous one. If there is nothing or if there is no thoroughly thought out answer, then I say, okay, how do you know? Means then you're essentially doing the same thing and expecting more obedience, you know. So that might be a good strategy, but I have my own red flags uh, for that. And the point blank question I ask CEOs and the other potential colleagues is that do you see product as a competency decision or a capacity decision? So if it is
Very
competency,
important question.
if it is competency, you are more tolerant.
Yes.
If it is capacity, you think, yeah, maybe, but my time is more important, so that's why I'm hiring you. The trouble come into the paradigm is that I'm fine with that as long as you are self-aware enough to know that I'm hiring somebody as a capacity hire, not as a competency hire. So if somebody who has strong opinion or somebody who is very stickler for process or how of the thing, then he might not enjoy it that much. You will always lock on. But if you are hiring as a competency, then you will be hands off by and large.
Precisely.
So that's essentially one question I always ask them.
Understood. Understood. So that's specifically from the product management perspective. And I'm a product manager as well, so I completely understand it. From the culture point of view, where do you come in and what do you think?
If somebody can give a very well thought out answer of these two questions, essentially you know that they are self-aware enough. Now the question becomes that are they an anomaly or they are more symptom of the wider population? He is the only thoughtful person or it's the culture which is forcing them to be thoughtful?
Yes.
Usually the second thing is better. When it's a cultural imperative, a cultural practice. Other is essentially you ask them some standard questions. For example, tell me when you were wrong. Or tell me
Okay.
has anybody ever what is the average time span of a product hire in your company? Average hire is let's say 1.5 year, for example. So in
Okay.
1.5 year, was that person ever right?
Yeah.
Or tell me you were wrong. And it turns out if most people don't have a very granular recall of these things. They have a general opinion about a person,
Yeah.
but they can't give like two instances where he was right or wrong. That kind of symptomatic of showing more of they don't have a writing culture. So I asked them explicitly, do you have a writing culture? Do you write and analyze your decision? Most companies unfortunately don't have one. At the same time, like I kind of lay down certain decisions, okay, what to build. So I basically, they ask, do you have questions? So to their surprise, they usually keep this question for the last 10 minutes and I stretch that to 1 hour. Okay, let's say these are 4 questions, like we should do this. So one standard trick in my bag of tricks is, let's say, if you're an e-commerce company, there is one thing around launching a new product category, launching a new campaign, redesigning a website or a product PDP page, or sending a new notification. Now, which of these decision is a consent decision and which is a consensus decision? Where everybody need to be okay. There should be consensus, or somebody has to take a call and everybody will consent to it. So I asked them explicitly that when you enter into the meeting, do you really know that this meeting, the decision which you're expecting out of it, is it a consent or consensus? And if not, then who is the person going to take decision? More often than not, people don't have these things explicitly declared in the company. There are norms. So, for example, some companies are heavily consensus driven, more established big companies where everybody have to build their consensus. And other is like more by force of personality. So I'm not much stickler when people don't have a declared modus operandi, but if asked, they should be able to put in one of the two brackets. Or that's not the case, then are you do you appreciate the benefit of this framework? Most people are not even aware of these framework and how they help. And then one red flag is that people say, "Oh, we are a startup. Then we don't have this. These are like big company things." No, sir. If you're getting into a meeting, who is the decision maker, or it is everybody the decision maker, it's a very understood thing. You should be able to. You can't hide behind "we are a startup" rope every time.
That's
You
true.
know, so that kind of you have to put people on spot at times.
Understood. All right. So these are basically your ways. And then I would want to get into like once you started to work in the company, what was that experience like?
Yeah, because I take notes, so I have like pretty much first impression of everyone kind of recorded for eternity. I can't really go back and change my opinion or if I like somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So turns out I was wrong around 60% of my assessment. Some people who kind
Okay.
of came across as a very aggressive or bad listener in the interview.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, they were pretty decent listeners.
Okay.
So when I started working, I thought, okay, oh, this person or he will be hard to work with because he don't listen. Turned out the person was in a hurry that day, you know.
Hmm.
So, but usually he listens. A person don't really like being taking interviews. One person
Yes.
hates taking interview.
Okay.
So not this thing. So yeah, I was wrong more than I was right in that, at least the assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of informed me for next time I was on a job hunt. So I realized that, okay, I should be giving more latitude to people because sometimes they are having a bad day, sometimes they don't like interviewing, sometimes maybe I come across as more opinionated and strongly opinionated person. Yeah. So it's like onus is on me also to kind of make them feel a bit comfortable, and which I used going forward in my while hiring. It's like
Nice.
two-way street. You are also,
Hmm.
it's like, that two body problem. Like you also entangle the other person's behavior. Sometimes your wife don't match. You start off on the wrong foot.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, definitely. Like the hiring and the interviewing is a especially fraught process because it's almost either like a date where you are on your best behavior, or as you very rightly said, that some people they may not feel good about it, or they are not well, or they are probably in a hurry at that point of time, and it becomes a very point in time decision and judgment rather than an overarching process that you work with. So you learned all of this, and this was about, we are talking about almost like 15 years ago. Okay. How have your thought processes or the way you decided to get into jar? Okay. Can you tell us about a bit of your story about you getting into jar and you evaluating the team here?
Yeah. So after KTM, I took a break. I was on a sabbatical. I wanted to see the world, do the backpacking, but unfortunately, the COVID happened and I was stuck. So the backpacking dream kind of put on hold for a while. And then when the after second wave of COVID, I sort of moved to Bangalore, and I knew the founders of JAR from my time in Delhi. Misbah was an old friend, and I knew Nishcha through Misbah. So we started talking, and I was back then kind of consulting for a bunch of startups, trying to like help them with their product strategy and testing their product and giving them feedback, all pro bono. I was doing a little bit of investments also, but I was kind of drifting, had no fixed idea what I wanted to do. I like the folks at JAR, and they said, okay, why you are like wasting time? Come sit at our office, tell stories to our team.
Okay.
So yeah, I said instead of sitting at home, might as well sit at their office, and I started working that way. And one thing led to another. I like the people, I like the idea, I like their approach. So yeah, all confluence of these factors, and I decided, okay, let's join it full time. So yeah.
Understood. Now, these are all like really, really good. And however well you vet the situations, as we already spoken about, that the things would change and there would be surprises. What you've spoken about were the good surprises. But there have been moments of challenge, tension, some of the things that may not be working or may not have, or your impression of something being good, and that changed. Can you tell me about an example of okay when that happened? And how did that mold your thinking?
I mean, not in jar per se, but I can tell you without naming name. In my previous employment, it has happened that I walked into the role with certain assumptions that okay, we are doing this, we are building a mobile TV streaming solution, but turns out that much of the decision making authority lies in my colleagues in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
You know, so we were already executing the stuff. Now the problem is it's always tempting to kind of make it a personal problem that okay, this person is control freak, this person don't want to relent the thing, but at the same time you have to empathize that that person don't know you in person.
Yes.
He knows you across a webcam. So I realized that okay, I onus is on us to kind of win the trust. I started doing over and above what I was asked for.
Okay.
And in due course of time, they started to share more control, more responsibility. And in next 2 to 3 months, we had an all hand offsite in India. And
Hmm.
once you kind of know people in person, it's a lot of this misunderstanding or those vibe mismatch kind of goes away. You get drunk, you party, and you understand, you meet families. So I'm not a big fan of remote. So this was one point where we were working across time zones and geography, and I learned these lessons. Around a decade and a half down the line, I applied the same thing again when we were trying to build hybrid. This time we had Zoom, but still, I'm not a remote person. The remote require a certain discipline, mostly around documentation, availability, processes, and all. So another thing which kind of I struggled was that young people who have never really worked in office environment and when their first job was remote, they don't know how to draw those boundaries. Sometimes they don't like they party in the night and then 9:30 in the stand up they are just showing up groggy and not opening the camera, and then we made a rule that everybody has to turn on the camera. So then you realize that okay, the same learning was also not applicable here. You have to give them some kind of a adjustment time to learn. So yeah, that's one thing which comes on top of my mind.
Understood. Understood. All right. So I want to come towards the takeaways and your recommendations for the other people who are listening to the podcast. So my first question for you is what did you learn about choosing your leaders and how should people, professionals think about hiring the boss, as you might termed it earlier?
Take away in hiring my boss situation was that is your boss hiring you for competence or for capacity? Even if there's no right or wrong answer, it's very tempting to be judgmental. So if Johnny Ive or Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or some great product person is hiring me for capacity, I'll be more than happy because I'll still learn a lot. And sometimes people who are not very high on learning or knowledge, they are also high. Incidentally, they are invariably high on insecurity. These are the people who will hire for capacity again. They're not for competency. So you have to kind of track that line very carefully, because nobody's going to tell you point blank. Other is that sometimes people are willing to let go of a lot of control because not because they are in principle okay with delegation.
Hmm.
They are able to let go of or willing to delegate a lot because they are growing at a very high rate. So whether
Okay.
the ability to delegate or trust or like outsource a certain decision is it person's inherent nature or it's a side effect of organizational growth. If you're on rocket ship, a lot of project will be delegated to you and you will be king. But the moment you hit a choppy weather, everything will be folded back. So you have to like tactically find out whether this person trusts his team by default or he trusts his team because he is too busy to verify.
Okay.
And it's
Hmm.
very hard to tell because at this level, let's say you are being, if somebody is hiring me, they are at a certain growth trajectory. So after 20 year in industry, you interview for a place where there's certain growth happening and they need to manage that growth. You have to check whether this delegation is coming out of sense of overwhelm or out of sense of like inherent value they see in that person.
Hmm.
And again, I said nothing right and wrong in that. Both are good, but you should know so that you're not surprised down the line when the growth slows down and the CEO takes away all the control again.
Okay. Understood. Understood. So with this, like we are talking about you hiring your leaders. At the same time, you can't be not be impacted by this. So how have you developed your own leadership? And you are a leader, you are head of product at this point of time, and you have been in the leadership positions before. So when it comes down to hiring your own team, what are the very important parameters that you keep in mind, right from selecting the people to giving them the experience that really help them hire you as their leader?
I mean, selection is pretty easy. How eager they are to learn and how open they are to the possibilities that they might not know the answer. See, product management is not a skill like computer science, programming, where there's a stack overflow and you can find out the someone else's implementation and code it out. Every company is unique. Every situation is unique. Every design challenge is unique. So unless a person himself is very humble and willing to learn new things, it's very
Hmm.
hard to survive and excel. So that's one thing. Where the person is willing to learn, they're not full of themselves. Other is, do they have any real empathy toward user? Sometimes people don't have empathy, and nothing wrong with that. But not fit for the job. You should try something else. You know. Third is how hardworking they are. Smart people sometimes think that hard work is something people do when they are not able to do smart work. I don't see that as a mutually exclusive thing. Even when you're smart, you have to put hours in. Even when you're talented, talent can only constitute a certain part of the success. You have to put the goddamn hours. So that's something I see. And as per how to enable them, I allow them to fail.
Okay.
I can't tell you how many times I have taken the heat and team sees this. They respect me for that, but you have to ask them.
Okay.
But yeah, so other is essentially my aim is to basically every time they come to me for a decision, I ask them, how can I empower you or what can I do so that you can make this decision on your own? So how can I make myself redundant?
Hmm.
you know, so that I can focus on bigger problems. So if there is a design decision and one of my reportee comes to me and say, how do I decide whether to take this drop down or radio button for gender selection dialog box, for example.
Hmm.
And now the thing is, first, which is better for user? You don't need to ask me. User is like oblivious for this thing. Fine. Which one is better rendered on all the surfaces we have, like tablet, this, that, can I put a framework in place where essentially this decision can be taken by means of some guidepost
Hmm.
instead of me bringing in my opinion? Because if I can't tabulate or codify those things, there should not be very many decisions where I need to put my intuition or my judgment into practice. I should be able to codify and pass it on to my team. So if I'm having too many of those decisions every day, I need to basically simplify the problem, do a better job of mentoring my.
Understood. So one final question on this. What's the is has there been a mindset shift that has helped you grow as a leader and a professional?
Like everyone else, I also started as a programmer. And by default, you get a lot of latitude and you get a lot of respect as a programmer. But when I transitioned into a product manager, I have to basically earn my stripes every day. And that kind of keeps you humble. I think if had I stayed as a programmer, I would have been slightly more comfortable, slightly more confident,
Mhm.
but most of it would have come out of ignorance. And I would never have developed that empathy muscle and all. Now, when you are a product manager, you talk to a customer support person, and the person tells you like, "Hey, you talk a big game about your product, but see, day in and day out, I see people struggling with what you have built,
Mm.
and I see a lot of people don't really talk to customer care. I believe there are three people in organizations who are like very close to customer and they are never listened. One is
Mm.
customer support.
Yep.
They know where all is wrong, but I never rarely have seen in organization there's a feedback loop between customer care and product design. Other
Mm.
is your sales people, the research people who go out and talk to people. You know, but in most companies there is no robust or very tight feedback loop between these functions to product design.
True. True.
Idea is to basically make yourself redundant. Very few times they should come to you.
That's true. That's true. Absolutely makes sense. So in fact, you have said very rightly about the customer success and the customer relationship, the customer relations. So one of the companies that does it really well is Amex. During my MBA days, there was actually one major project that we were doing. So this is called a MAP program, at Michigan Ross. And there I literally sat down with the customer success team, looking at and listening to the calls and speaking with some of the people literally on the floor who talk to the customers day in and day out. And that was 2006. It's coming to be about 20 years. And I take those lessons I learned in that customer service floor every single day into my own product career.
Great. Overall, hotel is great. Zappos was very good.
Mm.
If you ask me, I find Amazon to be very functionally, very swift and very elegant. Customer support. Ultra Human is good. Jar is great, I believe, if I may say so myself. So yeah,
Yep, got it. Got it. Awesome. Prashant, thank you so much for taking the time today. This has been absolutely great.
that's fun. Thanks for having me.